Oh, hi guys. Welcome back to Dirty 20. Today, we're talking about one of my absolute favorite topics, miniatures. So, in D&D, and we have talked about this in the past, but there's a couple of different ways that people play. Sometimes people play what is called theatre of the mind. Now, this is where everything is descriptive. It's where the dungeon master sets the scene and everybody describes what they're trying to do, but it's paper, pencil, and dice, and that's pretty much it. Now, one of the other big ways that a lot of people play is on the grid. Now, what that means is that you often have some gridded mats and small miniature, almost like toy soldiers. We refer to them as miniatures or minis, and they represent your character. It's almost like a token in a board game, or if you think of Monopoly, you have the little dog, the car, the hat. It's a similar kind of thing. It represents you, your character in the world. Now, I come from a wargaming background. What it means is that I played mass battles with miniature soldiers, and often it was a scale which was around 25 millimeters. Nowadays, you're looking at 25 to 32 for a lot of the commercially available miniatures, and I grew up modeling, essentially, putting these things together, gluing them together, painting them and fielding them in battles where you would roll dice and, kill off soldiers. People have been doing it for hundreds of years. It's a very popular pastime here in the UK. D&D, though, is more than that, right? You're playing a character, and so the idea of a faceless soldier is not really kind of what you go for. So miniatures were not always adopted, but they have been used for the longest of time. There's a very famous series of miniatures which were brought out around the time when D&D was becoming very popular, and they were Middle-earth miniatures. So Tolkien, it was Frodo and Gandalf and Aragorn and all those kinds of characters in small pewter form. A lot of D&D players decided to start using them, and this is how this element of the game was developed. You might be asking yourself, well, do I need to get miniatures? No, absolutely not. The game is fine without miniatures, without maps, without any of those extra bits, but they can be a lot of fun as well. Putting them together, painting them, anyone who's done any kind of art or craft can attest to the fact that it's a very calming thing to do. It is something that you can focus on, and at the end of the day, you have this beautiful thing that you've done yourself. You might be asking yourself, well, where can I get these miniatures? How much would they cost? Well, there's lots of answers to this question, and I'm going to try and talk you through some of these. First of all, there is a company called Games Workshop. Now, this is the company that I grew up with, playing a lot of their games, and they are probably the top dog in the world when it comes to miniature sales. They have their own IP, so their own stories and backgrounds and lore. It's adjacent to D&D, but not exactly the same, so you might not be able to get exactly what you're looking for if you look into buying from Games Workshop. I would say that they are quite expensive, and they need to be assembled, which isn't always the easiest thing in the world, and they need to be painted. Another source is the Wizards of the Coast kind of official partner. They're called WizKids. Now, these guys sell D&D specific miniatures, so any of the races which might not be in other fantasy settings, whether it's tieflings or tabaxi or Goliaths, can be found through WizKids. They're fantastically cheap, but the quality isn't always the highest. Sometimes if a miniature has a sword, it might not be exactly straight. You have to, do some things to kind of fix it. They do come pre-assembled, which is nice. And they also come pre-primed, which means that they're ready for you to start painting straight out of the box, which is not true for things like GW or Games Workshop. But I've had mixed experience in taking it out and starting to paint it immediately, so I'm not sure about that entirely. But if you're looking for something very specific, which is D&D, then these are the guys to turn to. Another place where I have found a lot of my miniatures is through board games. A lot of modern board games come with, quite beautifully sculpted miniatures. I'm thinking about, for example, the very famous Zombicide series, or the Dark Souls series, which was a video game originally, but they brought out a board game with absolutely incredible miniatures, well worth checking out. These come pre-assembled, but not pre-painted. They do tend to come colored. So what I mean is that the heroes in Zombicide come in an orange kind of plastic, whereas the bad guys are all kind of grey. If you're not really into your painting, you can use them that way. But personally, I think that's one of the best elements of modeling and dealing with miniatures, is actually getting to paint them. You also have some independent manufacturers. Some of my favorites are, for example, Black Scorpion Miniatures. They make some really cool kind of pirate type miniatures. So if you're, into your pirate campaign, those guys are amazing. They recently released a set of mounted fighters. So you have like a dwarf on a snail, which is really, really cool. But they do beautiful sculpts. Also, big shout out to Atlantis Miniatures. I love the designs of them, although they are often a little bit too big in scale. Again, 25mm to 32mm is the usual scale that people use for D&D and for a lot of war games. So that is the one that is easiest to find. There's also a company called Hero Forge. Now, these guys are really interesting. They have a character creation menu. So anyone who's ever played an RPG in a video game, you often get choices of your character. How do they look? Do they have long hair? Do they have, a crazy mohawk? Do they carry a sword or an axe? What kind of armor do they wear? So all of these elements, you can actually choose from their website, and you can do one of two things. You can either get them to print that miniature for you, because they have 3D printers, which is a very expensive option. Or you can buy the STL file to potentially print yourself if you have a 3D printer, or print with another company. Recently, they started doing color printing as well, which is really, really cool. I recommend you check out their website, because the options that you have, poses, equipment, everything about them are bespoke and personalized. Couple of gripes: it is very expensive to get one printed by them and shipped. But if it's your character that you've spent hours and hours deciding on and creating, and you're absolutely obsessed with playing him, and you can't find anything else which matches what you have in your head, then these guys and a couple of other companies that do what they do is really the way to go. The other thing that I'm not crazy about is the art style of their miniatures. I would say that it looks a little bit cartoonish, and that's fine, but if that's not the aesthetic that you really like, then it might not really be for you. Kickstarter is another option. We've talked about Kickstarter in the past. It can be hit or miss. I've had miniatures that were absolutely beautiful and I absolutely love. I've had others that really weren't that great. Others still which were beautiful but were so fragile that they broke as soon as I kind of did anything with them. So it's a mixed bag. Shop at your own peril with Kickstarter is what I always tell people, but there are some really cool things out there that people are putting out. Finally, there's the 3D printing option. Now, not a lot of people have these right now, and there is discussion about whether they're the kind of thing that are necessary for anyone, but if you're a miniature hound like myself, having a 3D printer is pretty cool, and it opens up so many possibilities. I recently backed a Kickstarter where the product is actually STL file. I'm paying for a designer to build the sculpts in a 3D environment, and then I am downloading them from online, putting them into my 3D printer and printing them out. Now, it's exciting, it feels like the future, and you can do some really cool stuff. The one I just backed has these incredible airships, and I'm really excited for it. We'll put a link in the description to check them out. But it's another option. However, not for everybody. So thank you so much for watching the video today on miniatures. What this leads to, inevitably, if you want to play with miniatures, it means that you have to play with maps, which is a video we're going to do in the future. Hopefully you'll come back, check it out, give us a like and subscribe. Thank you so much, and keep slaying. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to get in touch, please head on over to La Victoria Productions on Facebook. You can also check us out on Instagram. I'm Enano LVP. Jazzy J Cherot is our producer. He's also on Twitter at Mouth La Victoria. We're also on LinkedIn. And if you get the time, please head on over to our website, www.lavictoriaproductions.com.